First question today is this from Brenda on Facebook. Through all my life in my religious studies, I had never even heard of Swedenborg until stumbling on him via Curtis on YouTube. I was godsmacked, speechless, and now I can't get enough. I can't be the only one this has happened to. I've been studying different religions since I was a child and so close to some 50 years now, and I'm just now hearing the name of Emanuel Swedenborg. So if I could ask Curtis anything, it would be of that nature. Why is the world in general just now hearing about him and his work? Which is the question anybody who's into Swedenborg asks themselves, right? This is cool. You know, there are less cool things that get a lot more airtime than Swedenborg. So if you guys could, in a couple of sentences, succinctly wrap this up for us, why isn't Swedenborg bigger than he is? You want to start, Dr. Rose?
Sure. I think he's the most influential unknown person. One thing that happened over the history of the reception of his works was that in the 19th century, a number of new religious movements were started that had at least pieces of his teachings that were incorporated into their thing that became much better known than his original, work. But they left his name off for obvious reasons, because they weren't. That isn't what they were advertising.
Are we naming names? Like what religious?
I'd rather not.
Do we want to offend people? Okay.
And I'm not an expert in this area, but I understand there's a number of things in New Thought or Christian Science or even the Unification Church and even what's colloquially referred to as Mormonism and so on. There were a number of things that developed that had Swedenborg elements in them.
Okay.
Another piece that I would cite is that Swedenborg got very identified in the late 19th century with spiritism and seances and things like that.
Right.
And then in the early 20th century, when spiritism was kind of debunked and booed off the stage and seen as just people rapping on the bottom of the table, Swedenborg kind of went out with the bathwater, so to speak.
Okay.
And so for quite a while there, when there was a lot of materialism and existentialism in the 20th century, Swedenborg kind of disappeared from view for a few decades, and now he's on the rise again.
Yeah, it's kind of like The Darkness, the band. After hair metal came and went, but they made this resurgence. We're trying to do that for Swedenborg.
That's right.
Okay.
Well put.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to tack on to what Dr. Rose said he was fairly well known toward the end of his life in Europe, and after he went to the spiritual world, he was well known, and he was well known in the United States too. In the late 18th century, early 19th century, you have Emerson, and you have New England Transcendentalism and things like that. So there's the new religious movements and spiritism that's negative from a Swedenborgian perspective. But there's also a tremendous growth in naturalism and materialism in the late 19th century through the early 20th century, there's the sort of what they call the secularization thesis, which is as science and technology develop, people just turn away from religion and the spiritual world, and they're just more about being comfortable in the natural world. But there's been some research done that shows that secularization thesis, even if it's got some truth to it, is not the whole truth. There was actually a very intentional turning away from religion from about 1870 to 1930, particularly among intellectuals and people who wanted to become professionals in journalism, in medicine, in education. Sociology, for example, is one discipline. Psychology was another one. And you can see this in Christian Smith's book. It's called The Secular Revolution, published by University of California Press, I think 2003.
It's a great press.
So you've got the cultural elites who have the sort of commanding heights of what people are talking about and what's, if you want to put it this way, what's cool and what's not, what's acceptable socially.
Yes, we do have control of that.
Intellectually and what's not. And there's this massive turn away from anything spiritual, anything religious, and that really sinks a worldview like Swedenborg.
Like Swedenborg, which kind of caters to people who are very educated in the first place, because you got to be pretty educated just to get your way into that forest of terminology. The real, like, the salt in the wound is that Swedenborg was cooler a century ago, or whatever, more than a century ago than he is now.
Years.
So Chelsea, you have some thoughts about the Swedenborg and his obscurity?
Oh, I just wonder, like, why. I mean, the main obvious reason why anybody's hearing about them now is because of the internet and just the widespread connection that we can do live stream and YouTube. Just all that whole phenomena is partly why, and I think maybe Swedenborg is like bubbling up to the surface as much as it is. I think I'm just conjecturing. It's just that it's well suited to fitting in a lot of different conversations.
Yeah,
like it's sort of. And that's something that sort of just the global conversation through the internet is interested in. It's just sort of like, so before, it's sort of hard to, people, like you said, he's sort of the most influential unknown person, is like, because it's hard to take Swedenborg and just like make him this big, huge thing that everybody's going to move towards, in terms of like, he's much more of like, his ideas can resonate with a lot of different viewpoints. So it's hard to push him down into this like strict orthodoxy of something, like it's more his teachings themselves sort of push up against being characterized in one way or another, because like even as we experience in the audience of the show, people from so many different faith backgrounds can resonate with the ideas, and so I think that's suited to the kind of conversation around spirituality that we are interested in having today, that people were maybe less interested in the past.
Right, it doesn't lend itself to the us and them kind of thing.
Right.
And in my humble experience being on the web, trying to share Swedenborg with people, the problem is that he's just a very, very strange combination of flavors. That you're going to try to. He talks so much theology, Christian theology. He also tells you about the weird hats that spirits wear. He's also going to go on and on about love and wisdom and light and heat. It's very easy for him to rub people the wrong way. You just pick what you don't like, and then you can throw them out. So who is really going to be primed to have this like sort of Christian mindset, but I also want to talk about the spirits of the earths and the universe. It's just. But I do agree that the conversation. I mean, things that Swedenborg was saying back in his day, all faith can be a path to heaven. Just the very, very universalist kind of stuff. Now is more in vogue, but the answer is, I don't know. The answer is nobody tried hard before to get him out there, so we're trying hard. So I think we could
left it to us to have that fun.
Yeah, I think and a lot of people try. You have Helen Keller was trying her heart out to get it out there. A lot of people really went for it, and he's had his ups and downs. But maybe it's just about the tools, the web, and the zeitgeist. If I haven't already used that word, the time.
Zeitgeist.
So, I feel like we could do the whole hour on this, but we should probably move. After what I was going to say is after your last comment, we should probably move
just
on.
Another phenomenon is even though naturalism grew very strong, and there was a reaction to that by people going back to, okay, we have to stick by the literal sense of the Bible, and of course if that goes against Swedenborg's view also. And so if you're not a kind of literalist, and if you don't believe these fundamental things, then you're a cult and New Church. I mean, you look at Kingdom of the Cults, which is a book, and you'll see Swedenborg is listed in there. And so he's too mystical to be a canonical scientist and philosopher.
That's right.
And he's too critical of traditional Christian theology to be one of us Protestants or Catholics.
Yeah.
Right.
And then he's too spiritual and the followers have been too small to be considered mainstream.
Yep.
And so it's this weird little marginal thing that is just totally dependent upon the Lord, seeing when the time is ripe.
That's what I was trying to say. All that stuff. He's too something for something.
Yeah.
And can I make one more very quick
Please
point?
do. That's what I was going to say.
He was very, very famous in the late 19th century, especially in North America, household name. Everybody, who's who. So if you study people from that time period, you bump into people who are reading Swedenborg. He was very influential then, but it's really true that it dried up later.
Yeah. Okay, now let's go to Chelsea.
It's sort of fun that it leaves us to do a lot of fun detective work. Like it's kind of, since nobody's overtly has been like toting a Swedenborgian flag really, because like you said, the sort of hard to categorize thing, it leaves a lot of interesting study to see where that influence has been. And recently I was reading about Christian missionaries in India in the after the East Indian Company or whatever, the British
East India Company,
being there. Just this one guy who was then influential to sort of Christian missions and stuff at that time, was hugely influenced by Swedenborg, and even wrote to the Swedenborg Society at the time saying, why aren't you guys here? I'm hearing all this Christian stuff from everybody else, but why aren't you here? Because I love all these Swedenborg books that he just happened to find in somebody's library in England or something. And so it's just, you don't know where these, it's idea based, and I think that's what's internet friendly.
Yeah,
an idea based thing, not necessarily a label based
or the charisma based
thing.
or
right.
whatever.
So
well, the good news is that he never really spread that much, because otherwise you'd have these like top tier people coming in to be Swedenborgians, but we get to do it.
That's right.
So all right, let's take a